Like Old Times by Elena Willie. Amy Watson, who was aged 28, was getting ready for work at a restaurant called La Brutal Asiento, which means in English, the brutal murder. Her long, light, brown hair that fades to a light pink is in twin tails. Her eyes are apple green. Her skin is white. She is wearing a dark red crop top with long sleeve, which she hates, but it's part of the work dress code, and a black leather skirt, which she also hates. She decided to wear some black leggings. They weren't in the dress code, but it made her feel more comfortable. She is also wearing black shiny pumps that have the belt fastened so they stay on easier. She also has on black eyeshadow and eyeliner and foundation, and dark red lipstick, which she doesn't like either. After she was ready, she left the apartment and got in her beige 1961 Checker Marathon, which was in very bad shape. The turn signals were almost always on the fritz, the air conditioning didn't work, and the brakes sometimes went out. She knew she needed a new car, but she can't afford to get anything else, and she doesn't feel like she deserves any better. She drove over to work, which was in a weird place for a restaurant, through the foggy night. It was a little past town, in the woods, and no other buildings were around. When she arrived, she entered the building, and just like always, whenever she entered, she got goosebumps. This place always scared Amy every time she entered. Amy started her shift as usual. She took customers' orders, cleaned the tables, like always. She went to a table where a man, who looked about 60, just sat at. "May I take your order?" she asked, but the man sat silent for a while, until he looked at her. His hair was messy and long. He had a very untamed beard and bags under his pale blue eyes. "No, thank you," he said. "But I would like to hear the history of this place," he said, with no expression. Amy made a curious face, but was happy to answer. "This place has been around since the 1920s. A very rich family lived here, but they mysteriously disappeared. It fell in disarray until it was bought in 1960. With some repairs, it was as good as new, and was a rental house for a while. But in 1989, people stopped renting, and it was put up for sale. It sat here to rot until 2017, when it was bought by the current owner, and ever since it has been this lovely restaurant," Amy said, with a slight smile. "Tell me about what happened here in 2002, the man said in a low tone, while he was glaring at Amy. Amy's blood ran cold as she stared with wide eyes. Nothing happened, sir. At that time, no one owned it," Amy said, trying to hold in her fear. "I see," the man said. Then he left. Amy sighed in relief that the man was gone, and continued working. Time passed, and it was now midnight. Everyone left, and Amy was to clean after hours. While sleeping around the counter, she heard a faint noise coming from the kitchen, so she went to investigate. 3 plates were on the ground, shattered to bits. Amy shrugged it off as gravity, seeing that the plates were in a big stack. She cleaned it up, but then the room went cold. Shivering, she left and went to one of the back rooms to organize some things. When she entered the shelf-filled room, the door slammed behind her. She turned around, wide eyes, and when she turned back around, the room had changed. The wooden walls looked worn down and dirty. The floor was creaking every time she moved. She walked in a little, more curiosity taking over. But when she looks down, she finds the knife covered in blood, and it looked fresh. And nearby was the body of a 10-year-old girl, with curly blonde hair, her soft blue eyes frozen in fear, her mouth open like she was screaming. Her white dress was blood-stained, and her throat was slashed open and was gushing blood. There was blood everywhere, on the walls and the floor. It was also on Amy's hands. Amy stumbled back, looking at her hands and at the horrid sight. She held her head and closed her eyes, her breath shaky and tears rolling down her face. When she opens her eyes, it's gone. The room was full of shells once more. No blood, no knife, no dead little girl. Amy caught her breath and calmed down, brushing off what she saw as some weird dream that happens when one's awake or something. She began organizing some things when she hears something, the sound of wood being carved. She turns around and is horrified by what she sees. Why? Has been carved into the wall behind her, splotches of blood surrounding it. It's not real. You're imagining things, she said to herself and got back to work. A few minutes later, she hears the sound of something fall gently behind her. She turned and looked down and saw a locket, gold with the rose carving. She picked it up, being curious, and opened it and froze in shock at what was inside. It was a picture of two little girls. One had blonde and curly hair with soft blue eyes. The other had short, light brown hair with light green eyes. Both were smiling bright. Suddenly the blonde girl in the picture was covered in blood, and so was Amy's hands. She dropped the locket and stared at her blood-stained hands, pure panic and fear washing over her. Just then the little girl with blonde curly hair appeared in front of her. Her throat slit open, but she was standing. Amy looked at her with shocked eyes and sadness. "Why?" she said, looking at Amy with sad eyes. Amy began to shake and cry. She soon collapsed while crying as she looked at the little girl in front of her. The little girl spoke again. "Can you join me so we can play like old times?" She held out a knife in her hand, gesturing for Amy to take it. Amy smiled sadly as tears were falling down her face. As she slowly grabbed the knife, she said, "Yes." Then with one swift motion, Amy's vision then faded.